The wind, borne over the vast expanse of Michigan, swept across the plains of Illinois, growing colder and angrier with each passing mile. He whistled through the wires, tore off the last leaves from the oaks like withered gloves, and threw them on the windshield of the car in which Mark was trying to forget himself. The October evening fell to the ground early and ruthlessly, like a funeral shroud. Mark drove down Archer Avenue, that long, dreary ribbon of asphalt that connected the bustling south side of Chicago with the peace and quiet of the suburbs. He didn't like this road. She had always seemed to him like a frontier, a limbo, a place where the line between the bustling world of the living and the silent realm of the dead was blurred. To his right, beyond a low fence, the Restoration Cemetery lay in darkness. Countless tombstones, like a frozen stone army, stood in silent guard under the stingy light of the moon, breaking through the ragged clouds. He was returning from work, from another day of figures, reports, and empty conversations. There was the same desolate silence inside him as in these autumn fields. The divorce that happened 6 months ago was still an open wound, and Mark was looking for salvation in loneliness and long, aimless trips. He turned on the radio, but some annoying techno beat was pouring out of the speakers, and he turned it off with annoyance. The silence in the cabin became even louder. That's when he saw her. In the light of his headlights, a girl was standing on the side of the road. He squinted in disbelief. It was cold, the wind was biting, and she was wearing only a light summer azure dress that hugged her slender figure and fluttered in the wind, as if disobeying the laws of physics. Her blonde, almost whitish hair was pulled back into a neat hairstyle like the stars of old Hollywood movies. Crazy, Mark's first thought flashed through his mind. He'll freeze to death. He slowed down and stopped next to her. The passenger door window rolled down with a soft hum. "Do you need any help?" he asked. "Are you cold? Where can I drop you?" The girl slowly turned her head towards him. Her face was pale and incredibly beautiful, with regular delicate features. But what struck Mark most was her eyes. They were huge, the color of dark amethyst, and there was such a bottomless, ancient sadness in them that his insides tightened. "Thank you." Her voice was soft, rustling like the whisper of fallen leaves underfoot. "I'm going to the Cemetery of Restoration, more precisely, to the house opposite." "Get in." Mark reached out and opened the passenger side door. She slid into the seat with an unnatural, almost airy smoothness. The door closed by itself with a dull click. The cabin smelled of coffee and leather, but now a new, strange, and elusive scent was mixed with these smells. The scent of faded roses and damp, cold earth. Mark started off. He stole a glance at the passenger. She sat motionless, staring straight ahead into the darkness beyond the windshield. Her hands, delicate and pale, lay in her lap. He noticed that she wasn't wearing her seatbelt, but he didn't comment. There was a certain detachment in her posture, as if she was not here, but in some kind of her own distant world. "My name is Mark." He broke the silence, feeling awkward. The girl slowly turned her head towards him. A faint, sad smile touched her lips. "Maria?" she replied. The name sounded like an echo. Mark felt a slight chill. He thought he recognized the name, the story, but he couldn't remember where. "It's not cold like autumn today," he muttered, trying to start a conversation. "You're wearing such a light dress. Aren't you cold?" Her answer was simple and final. I don't feel cold." The car rolled along the dark road. The lights of the few oncoming cars illuminated her profile for a moment, and Mark again felt as if her features were slightly blurred out of focus. He shook his head, blaming it all on fatigue and the play of light and shadows. "Do you walk here often?" he asked. "I mean, this way?" "Yes," Maria replied. "I often go here. I'm looking for—" "What are you looking for? Maybe I can help." "I'm looking for a way home," her voice cracked, "but I can't find him." "I never can." Mark gripped the steering wheel. There was such longing in her words that he wanted to stop, hug her, comfort her. But something held him back, a vague, primal sense of danger. "Do you live alone?" He wouldn't let up. "I lived with my father, but he didn't understand. He wanted me to marry someone else, and I loved dancing. We met with him secretly at the O. Henry Ballroom. Do you know this place?" An icy needle pierced Mark's heart. The O. Henry Ballroom. He knew. It was a famous place in the 30s. Now there was a shopping mall in its place. "That's it. He's gone," he said carefully. "No?" She looked at him in surprise, and for a moment there was a flicker of bewilderment in her eyes, as if he had said something absurd. "But I was there yesterday. We were dancing. He was holding my hand." She raised her hand and looked at it, as if remembering something. "He was so handsome and so unhappy. His parents were against our relationship, but we believed that love was stronger. That night, we had a fight that night. I ran out of the hall. He followed me. He caught up with me in his car on this very road." Mark's car was approaching the intersection of Archer Avenue and Roberts Road. Directly opposite, beyond the fence, stood the dark gates of the Cemetery of Restoration. "Here," Maria said suddenly, and her voice became louder, more anxious. "Stop here." Mark, obeying an inexplicable impulse, slowed down and pulled over to the side of the road directly in front of the cemetery gate. He turned to her. "Maria, listen, I do not know what happened to you, but—" "He did not see the truck," she interrupted, looking at the gate with wide eyes. There were tears in them, but they did not flow down her cheeks, but seemed to freeze in purple depths. "He was driving too fast. He wanted to catch up with me, bring me back. He lost control. The car overturned. I saw it. I ran to him, but it was too late." She fell silent, and in the silence of the salon, only the intermittent sound of her breathing could be heard, which, as Mark suddenly realized with horror, was not really there. He couldn't see the steam coming out of her mouth in the cold cabin air. "Maria." His own voice sounded hoarse. What happened to you?" She slowly turned her face towards him. Now her features were distinct, and the sadness in them had been replaced by something else. Knowledge, acceptance, endless weariness. "They said it was an accident," she whispered, "that I ran into the road, that he tried to avoid me. But that's not true. We both died that night. He was buried in the family plot. What about me? I was brought here in the resurrection. My body is lying here, but I can't log in. I can't find peace. I have to finish my journey. I have to go home. But my house, he's gone." She looked at him for the last time, and there was such universal sorrow in her gaze that Mark felt goosebumps running down his spine. "Thanks for giving me a ride, Mark," she said. "You've been kind." Most of them don't stop. And then she started disappearing. It wasn't an instant. At first, her hand lying on the seat became transparent. Then the contours of her dress began to blur, melting like a haze in the morning wind. Her image slowly dissolved into thin air, becoming part of the darkness, part of the cold night. Mark, transfixed and paralyzed by terror, could not move. He watched as the beautiful, sad face paled, became a ghostly silhouette, and then disappeared altogether. She's gone. It was as if she had never existed. Mark sat motionless, staring at the empty passenger seat. It was dry and clean. Not a trace of her dress, not a dent from her weight. But the cabin still had that strange smell of roses and damp earth. And more. He could also feel the icy chill coming from where she was sitting, a cold that had nothing to do with the temperature outside. He took a deep breath, trying to stop his hands from shaking, and abruptly turned his head to the window. His gaze fell on the cemetery gate, and then he saw it. In the light of the single lantern that illuminated the entrance, he noticed strange deformations on the iron bars. They were bent outward, as if someone superhumanly strong was trying to break free from the inside. And on one of the bars at the very top, as if fused into metal, there were two pale, delicate prints, female fingerprints. With a cry that was born somewhere in the depths of his soul, Mark took off. The car screeched out onto the deserted road and sped away from this cursed place. He stepped on the gas without looking in the rearview mirror, afraid to see in it a pale face with eyes full of eternal sadness. He raced down Archer Avenue, and the darkness outside the window now seemed to him alive, breathing, inhabited by shadows. He mistook every light in the distance for the headlights of an approaching car, every silhouette by the road for a slender figure in a blue dress. He didn't know how he got home. He flew into his apartment, slammed the door, and leaned against it, breathing heavily. The silence of the quarter was deafening. He went to the bar, poured himself a whiskey with a trembling hand, and drank it in one gulp. The alcohol burned his throat, but it couldn't banish the chill that had seeped into his bones. He sat down at the computer. His fingers ran over the keyboard, typing in the search bar. Ghost of Archer Avenue, blue dress, Restoration Mary. And he found it. Dozens of articles, hundreds of testimonies. The story of Jerry Pallas, who picked up a girl in a white dress on a cold night in 1939. Stories about taxi drivers, police officers, and ordinary people. It's all the same. A beautiful young woman, an old-fashioned dress, a request for a ride to the cemetery, a disappearance at the gate. A story that repeats itself for decades. References to bent fence rods in 1976. About the mysterious handprints. He wasn't the first. He was just another link in an endless chain, another listener in this eternal tragic tale around the campfire. Mark leaned back in his chair and covered his face with his hands. He remembered the look in her eyes. Her sadness was real. Her pain was real. She wasn't an evil spirit. She wasn't a demon seeking revenge. She was a soul stuck between worlds. A soul whose life was cut short so suddenly and unfairly that death itself could not hold her back. Her eternal journey down Archer Avenue was not a curse, but a metaphor for all the interrupted paths, all the unfinished dances, all the young lives taken from the ruthless wheel of fate. Since then, Mark has never driven down Archer Avenue after sunset. He changed routes, lengthened the path, just to avoid this road. But sometimes, on the quietest and loneliest nights, when the wind howled outside his apartment window, it seemed to him that he heard a distant, barely perceptible whisper. A whisper full of longing and loneliness. and he knew that Maria was still there. She's still walking along the side of the road in her light blue dress, not feeling the autumn chill. She's still looking for a way home that she's lost forever. She still hopes that some kind person, motivated by compassion, will stop and offer her a ride. And maybe next time, she'll finally be able to reach her destination, cross the threshold, and find the peace she so desperately craves. In the meantime, her story, like hundreds of other American legends born around campfires, continues to live on. It is passed from mouth to mouth, scaring and fascinating new generations. She is a reminder that some roads never end, some stories are never forgotten, and some souls never leave. They're just waiting for their story to be told again. In the light of the campfire, under the whisper of the autumn wind. It's been 3 months since that night. Winter has come into its own, encasing Illinois in an icy shell. But Mark's inner chill did not go away. He became obsessed. His apartment has become the headquarters of a mad researcher. The walls were covered with printouts of old newspaper clippings, maps of Archer Avenue with notes of places of alleged meetings, printouts of forums of paranormal researchers. He found out that her real name might have been Mary Brennan. In the yellowed Chicago Tribune newspaper of 1934, he found a tiny note about the tragic death of a young couple. John Pascal, 22, and Mary Brennan, 19, died in a car crash on Archer Avenue near the Cemetery of Restoration. According to preliminary data, Mr. Pascal's car lost control on a slippery road and crashed into a tree. The young men were returning from an evening at the O'Henry Ballroom. The note was dry and emotionless, as befits a chronicle, but for Mark, it wasn't just lines. It was her life, her death. He found a photo in the archives. The picture was taken at some kind of city celebration. A young man in a suit with a bow tie and a girl in a light dress with a flower in her hair. They were laughing at each other. She had the same face, the face of the ghost that sat in his car. Mark stared at this photo for a long time, trying to connect the image of a happy, lively girl and an eternally sorrowful spirit in his head. One evening, while looking through the records in the police archive, he managed to gain access through a journalist friend. He came across a 1978 report. A taxi driver named Ralph Glober described his flight in detail. He picked up a girl in a blue dress from the ruins of the old O'Henry. She was silent. As they approached the cemetery, she suddenly screamed, "He's here! I see him!" Ralph turned around, but the seat next to him was empty. The report stated that the taxi driver was in a state of severe shock, and a strange frost-like plaque was found on the door handle on the passenger side, which did not melt at room temperature. Mark understood that he had not just encountered a ghost, he collided with an echo, with a powerful psychometric imprint left on the fabric of reality at the moment of severe trauma. This energy, this unspoken pain, has fueled the legend for decades. But why did he see her? Why him? The answer came from somewhere Mark hadn't expected. At the local library, in the local history department, he got into conversation with an elderly librarian, Miss Ethel. She was in her late 80s and had lived in the area all her life. "Oh, Mary," she nodded when Mark, trying to sound as neutral as possible, asked about local legends. Her eyes, faded with age, looked at him with understanding. "It doesn't appear to everyone, only those who carry the same pain in themselves, to those who have lost, the one whose heart is broken. She feels a kindred spirit." Mark was silent. Divorce, loneliness, emptiness. Yes, he was the perfect recipient. She doesn't want to scare, Miss Ethel continued, adjusting her glasses. She's looking for help, or he wants to warn you. Warn you? About what? The old lady sighed. The place where she died. Archer Avenue near the resort. It's not just a road. My grandmother, who was an immigrant from Ireland, said it was a delicate place. A place where the veil between worlds is especially fragile. The Indians who lived here before us considered this land sacred. They buried their shamans here. Mary, her death in such a place, at a time of intense emotional outburst, she didn't just become a ghost, she became a guardian, an indicator. When she appears more often than usual, this means that the veil is thinning even more, so something bad could happen soon. Miss Ethel's words hung in the air. Mark recalled stories that Mary's bursts of activity often coincided with local tragedies, fires, accidents. A coincidence? He wasn't sure anymore. Part 4. The Shadow of John Pascal. Mark's obsession grew. Now his goal was not just to learn the story, but to understand its mechanics. If Mary is stuck here, then what about John? His spirit had to be somewhere too. He began patrolling Archer Avenue, but not as a scared driver anymore, but as a researcher. With a video camera, a voice recorder for recording EVP, electronic voice phenomena, and an EMF meter. He kept a diary. One cold February night, his EMF meter went off the scale at the very corner where he assumed John's car had crashed. The air turned icy. Mark turned on the recorder. John Pascal? Are you here? Silence. Then, through the hiss on the recording, a faint, desperate whisper could be made out later. Mary, where are you? I can't find it. But that wasn't all. That evening, while watching the video from the dashboard camera, Mark saw something else. In the darkness, off to the side of the road, among the trees, stood a dark, blurry figure. She was tall, wearing a long coat and a hat that hid her face. She just stood there and stared at the road, to the accident site. It wasn't John. It was a different energy, darker, more patient. The guardhouse. Mark called him a gray man. He began to notice it in other old photos of accidents on Archer Avenue, always in the background, an indistinct shadow. Who is he? A soul collector? The ancient spirit of the place, watching the eternal repetition of tragedy? Or something else? Part 5. Symphony of Shadows. The next breakthrough came when Mark contacted a group of Chicago-based parapsychologists. They used sophisticated equipment, including thermal imagers and night vision devices. They agreed to help. At night, they set up their camp on the side of the road near the cemetery. The ether was filled with energy. The EMF meters were off the charts every now and then. The temperature was jumping. And then they saw it with the naked eye. Shadow, a pale, barely visible haze that took the shape of an old car, a Ford from the 1930s. He drove slowly along the road and, without slowing down, crashed into a tree, which was no longer there. The car didn't disappear. It froze for a moment, distorted, translucent, and then a familiar figure in blue fluttered out of it. Mary. She ran down the road, looking back, her silent scream frozen in the night. And then everything was gone. It was a loop, an echo of tragedy replayed over and over again. But this time, Mark noticed something new. At the moment when the ghostly Mary ran out onto the road, another shadow appeared from the forest. Tall, wearing a coat. The gray man. He didn't come any closer. He was just watching. And in his posture, as far as it could be seen, one could read not gloating, but regret. Endless, tired sadness. Part 6, Rose and Thorns. Mark realized that he couldn't stay away. He felt responsible. Connection. He returned to Miss Ethel with more questions. The gray man. She thought about it. Many nations have legends about such guardians. They are neither good nor evil. They are part of the balance sheet. They make sure that the subtle places do not rupture, so that the energies of the worlds do not mix in chaos. Perhaps Mary unwittingly is upsetting this balance with her eternal suffering. Her energy is too strong. The gray man, he won't let her leave because her leaving could create a gap. Or he's waiting for someone to replace her. Mark was horrified by the idea. Mary was not just a prisoner of her grief, she was a prisoner of some cosmic order, and her release could have cost someone their life. He drove back to Archer Avenue 1 without equipment. He got out of the car at the cemetery gate and looked at the bent bars. "Mary," he called out into the night, "I know your story. I know about John." The wind died down. The air froze. And then he saw her, not as a clear-cut ghost, but as a trembling mirage vision a few meters away. She looked at him, and there was not only sadness in her eyes, but also a question. "I'll try to help you," Mark said, and he didn't understand where the words came from. "But I need to know what really happened. Why did you run away from the club?" The vision became clearer. He felt a wave of emotions, not words, but pure feelings. Jealousy, misunderstanding. He saw in his mind how young John was shouting something at her in a rage in the dance hall. He saw her running out into the street, sobbing. He did not see the accident, but he felt a blow, not a physical one, but a blow of absolute, all-consuming horror and regret. They were both to blame, and both were innocent. It was just a tragedy of youth, fervor, and a wrong decision, compounded by a fatal combination of circumstances and the subtlety of the place. "He's sick too," Mark whispered. "John is here too. He's looking for you." Mary's ghost shuddered. For the first time, her face was contorted not with sadness, but with hope. She stretched out her hand, not to Mark, but into the void in front of her. And at that moment, a gray man came out of the shadows of the trees. He looked more like a lump of darkness than a human figure. He didn't move toward Mary. He looked at Mark. And Mark felt in that look not a threat, but a warning. Don't interfere with what you don't understand. Then everything was gone. Mark was left alone on the cold, dark road again. Part 7, The New Guardian. A year has passed. Mark was no longer possessed. His own wounds seemed to be healing. He found a new job, started dating a girl, but he never forgot. He sometimes came to Archer Avenue in the afternoon, stopped at the cemetery, and left a small bouquet of fresh roses by the bent rods. He felt it was the right thing to do. One summer evening, he was driving down Archer Avenue with a new girlfriend, Anna. They were laughing, listening to music. And as they drove past the resort, Mark took his eyes off the road for a second and looked at the familiar turn. There was no one there, no blue dress, no sad look. Only a quiet summer breeze shook the branches of the old oaks. But at the edge of the road, in the shadows, he caught a glimpse of another figure. Tall, dark, the gray man. And this time, it seemed to Mark that he barely nodded to him, not as a guardian, but as colleague, as someone who is now also a part of this story. Who knows? Who remembers? Mark realized that the legend would never die. It will evolve. Mary may have found her peace, or her energy may have finally dissipated, Or maybe she was just waiting for her story to be truly heard. But Archer Avenue will remain a thin spot, and new tragedies, big and small, will fuel his energy. There will be new ghosts, new legends, and the gray man will be waiting. Wait for a new guardian, a new storyteller, waiting for someone who, like Mark, will not just be afraid of the dark, but will want to understand the music that it plays. Music consisting of the whisper of dying leaves, the crackle of a tree, a surrendering flame, and the quiet, eternal echo of those who have not managed to find their way home. And this music will sound forever. Part 8. Archives of Silence. Mark's obsession, once burning like wildfire, has been replaced by a quiet, methodical coal smoldering in the depths of his soul. He did not give up the search, but changed his tactics. He was no longer a ghost hunter, but an archivist of sorrow. He realized that in order to truly understand one ghostly phenomenon, it is necessary to understand all the others that inhabit this node of reality. He started from the very beginning, from the ground. A study of old maps and geological survey reports has shown that a network of underground rivers and limestone caves runs under Archer Avenue and the cemetery. Limestone, as Mark knew, is often considered a natural enhancer and store of psychic energy. Water, especially underground water, is a conductor between worlds in many esoteric traditions. The earth itself was a giant antenna, tuned to the frequency of the otherworldly. Then he turned to the darker archives. Through a journalist friend, he gained access to classified police reports not only on accidents, but also on unsolved crimes, disappearances, and cases of sudden insanity in the Archer Avenue area. He made a chronological map. The peaks of Mary's paranormal activity and the appearance of the gray man coincided with frightening accuracy with waves of violence in Chicago, major man-made disasters in the region, and even with moments of deep political crises. Miss Ethel was right. This place was not just subtle. It was a barometer of the collective unconscious of the entire region. When society was convulsed by pain, the barometer of this pain showed a storm here on this piece of asphalt. He found references to other phantoms. The crying boy, who was sometimes seen by the stream behind the cemetery, is an echo of a drowned man from the 1950s. About the hooded shadows, a group of ghostly figures seen marching along the fence on foggy nights. Perhaps an echo of some forgotten prison party or mass burial. Archer Avenue wasn't just a single ghost road. It was a nature reserve, a pantheon of local deities of sorrow, where every tragedy had its own voice, and Mary was simply the most melodious and shrill of them all. The gray man, apparently, was the caretaker of this pantheon. Mark found traces of him, vague descriptions, vague shadows in photographs, in reports dating back to the early 20th century, and even in the diaries of the first settlers, who mentioned a tall, faceless watchman on the Indian trails that ran here to the asphalt.